Hi, Charles SirBookSage here, and this is episode 8 of my year-long Harry Potter first-time reread series. If this is your first time here, I'm rereading the Harry Potter series for the very first time, and I've broken it up into 52 parts where I'll be reading it every Sunday for a year. I started the Sunday right before Halloween, and I'll be reading it through next October 2018. And each Sunday, I read a set of chapters, record a vlog of my thoughts on those chapters, and then upload those every Monday. So if that's something you're interested in, hit the subscribe button, and let's get started. We left off last week with Harry finding the diary in the bathroom where Moaning Myrtle was, and then discovering Tom Riddle and being shown by Tom 50 years ago when the chamber had opened the last time, and how it was Hagrid's fault. And that's where that chapter ends. And now this episode today is going to cover the last 5 chapters. It's going to be chapter 14, Cornelius Fudge, chapter 15, Aragog, chapter 16, the Chamber of Secrets, chapter 17, the Heir of Slytherin, and chapter 18, Dobby's Reward. So let's get started. Chapter 14, Cornelius Fudge. Now, we get a nice throwback here at the beginning of this chapter, because based on Hagrid and what they know about Hagrid and Hagrid's love of any kind of creature, no matter how dangerous it is, we get a nice throwback to Norbert in the mention of the dragon in the first book. And it's easy to see Hagrid having that sort of spider, that creature, or whatever it was in the crate. It's easy to see Hagrid having some dangerous creature and keeping it in the castle to feed it and protect it and love it, and it getting out of hand and killing somebody. So it's not a wild leap to believe that Hagrid was the one who was responsible 50 years ago. But time passes now, and there aren't any more attacks for a while. Things are kind of quieting down. So they don't go and seek out Hagrid. And they're uncomfortable about confronting him about it anyway, because, you know, of how touchy he's been about his past and why he got kicked out of the school. And what I like about this reread is you realize the second time around that the reason there are no attacks going on for a while is because Ginny no longer has the book. Harry has it. And so the book, and Tom, through the book, can't control Ginny to make her open the chamber and attack people. But, you know, obviously you don't realize it the first time around. It's just there's some lull in it for whatever reason. But now, the second time around, you know it's because Harry's got the book and Tom can't control Harry. But we get close to Easter, and they realize year 3 is going to be coming up soon, and they have to actually start choosing their own courses now, going forward with year 3. They have to start figuring out what their major is going to be. And this is really going to determine where their place in the wizarding world once they get out of school, like what job they're going to have and what they want to do with their lives. And, of course, Hermione, being Hermione, signs up for everything. And what I like about that moment is it's a couple of things are accomplished there. It's a great character moment for Hermione. This is who Hermione is. But it's also more of Rowling building in and layering the overall 7-book series. It's a great foreshadowing moment for the Prisoner of Azkaban, because now, you know, here she's setting in the first seed of why Hermione ends up having the time turner in the next book. Because here we go, she's signed up for everything, which is impossible. But I like that here in this book, we're getting that kind of setup right away. And really nicely done. And Ron just picks some courses, and Harry just picks whatever the hell Ron picks, because he has no idea what he wants to do, and he'd rather just have Ron in all the same classes. But this little interlude's over, and now we're back to where the action begins. Quidditch is starting up again, and Harry's returning from a practice to discover his room has been ransacked and the diary's gone. And then he realized, okay, it had to have been someone in House Gryffindor who stole the diary. And the next day, right before Quidditch, Harry hears the voice again that only he can hear. And he's with Harry and Ron, and he's telling them, it's like, I can hear it. It's speaking again, and it's saying, like, kill this time, tear, rip. And Hermione has a light bulb go off in her head and runs off to the library. And I like this little passage here. I like a lot. It's one of my favorite little snippets in this book. And this is Hermione speaking. She goes, Harry, I think I've just understood something. I've got to go to the library. And she sprinted away up the stairs. What does she understand? Said Harry distractedly, still looking around, trying to tell where the voice had come from. Loads more than I do, said Ron, shaking his head. But why's she got to go to the library? Because that's what Hermione does, said Ron, shrugging. When in doubt, go to the library. Just a little snippet, I know, but I actually always love that little passage because it epitomizes the three of them in a way. Hermione being smarter than the two of them, going to the library to figure out stuff, doing actual proper research. And Harry and Ron going, huh? Which is typical of them because they're more of a go on emotion, roll with things kind of people. Far more than Hermione's a plotter and a planner. But it's Quidditch time, and right before the match can begin, McGonagall comes running up with a bullhorn. Matches are canceled. Everyone has to go back to their common rooms. And she takes Harry and Ron up to the infirmary. And there's a girl from Ravenclaw, one of the prefects, who's been petrified. And in the very next bed is a petrified Hermione. And they had been found close to the bathroom with a mirror lying next to them. And Harry realizes, okay, it's time to confront Hagrid. So the invisibility cloak returns finally in this book. And they cloak themselves, sneak out, go to Hagrid's cottage, and Hagrid lets them in, and he's all nervous and worried, and he's like keeps looking at the door and the windows. And then in a minute we learn why, because there's a knock at the door. Harry and Ron hide under the cloak again, and it's Dumbledore and Cornelius Fudge. And here we get to meet the Minister of Magic himself. And Cornelius has come to take Hagrid away to Azkaban, because they, just as a precaution, since they believe Hagrid was behind the chamber being opened the last time, they have to take him away this time. And if the attacks stop, then problem solved. If the attacks continue, then they know it's not Hagrid and they'll let him go. And what I like here is Dumbledore's not happy. And we begin to see that sort of friendly, kind, silly wizard that he projects kind of stripped away a little bit here. And Harry sees this fire in Dumbledore's eyes because he's not happy about Hagrid being mistreated like this. And then Lucius Malfoy shows up to make matters even worse with a letter from all the governors have declared Dumbledore suspended. And Dumbledore's still got that kind of fire in his eyes, but he agrees he's going to go. And right before he leaves, Dumbledore says, to me, one of the most memorable lines in the series. And I'm going to read that here because I just love this little passage. However, said Dumbledore, speaking very slowly and clearly so that none of them could miss a word, you will find that I will only have truly left this school when none here are loyal to me. You will also find that help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it. And you realize Dumbledore knows Harry's there underneath the cloak, and those words are meant for him. So out they go, and then Hagrid's ready to leave, and Hagrid stops and does his own little speech. If anyone wanted to find out some stuff, all they'd have to do would be to follow the spiders. That'd lead them right. That's all I'm saying. And then out he walks, and Cornelius Fudge is like, why are these people talking to an empty room? But that's pretty much how the chapter ends. Hagrid's being taken off to Azkaban. Dumbledore is suspended and being kicked out of school. So we're seeing a repeat of book 1 where Harry's allies are being slowly stripped away from him. So now it's on to chapter 15, Aragog. And summer comes rolling in, but nothing feels right. There's no Hagrid on the grounds, and Dumbledore's gone. Hermione's in the hospital. Everyone's scared and nervous. Everyone's jittery, except for good old Draco Malfoy, who's strutting around that school like he's king of the castle. He's loving every little moment of everything that's going on. Because he's a Malfoy. He's Slytherin. He knows he's pureblood. Nothing's going to happen to him. He doesn't have to worry about whatever this chamber is. And he's just drinking in everyone else's misery. Because that's part of how Malfoy's been raised. Draco's been raised by his father. And Draco's kind of brazen here a bit. Because even just sitting in potions class, he's hoping a mudblood is going to get killed in the next attack. And laments that Hermione didn't get killed in the last one, which of course sets Ron off. But herbology comes, and Harry spies spiders. And interesting little side thing here with Hermione being attacked. All those people that earlier in the semester were calling Harry the Heir of Slytherin and believing Harry was responsible, they all realize now that there's no way that's right, because Harry would never attack Hermione, of all people. And so that kind of separation that everyone had begins to start to melt away. And people who have been shunning him are starting to come around and sheepishly, if you will, start reconnecting with him. But in herbology, though, they see spiders going off into the Forbidden Forest, and Harry knows, okay, we're going to have to go in there. Now, Ron has never been in there. Ron had a different detention in the first book when Harry was sent in with Draco and I think Hermione and Neville. And so they're going to go in, which is big of Ron, because Ron is absolutely terrified of spiders. So this is kind of a big deal. And Rowling really doesn't make much of it about how hard this has to be for Ron. So I just thought it was a bit odd that she really didn't hammer home just how terrified Ron was of spiders. But in they go. And they go get Fang and bring Fang with them, since Fang knows the forest. And they're getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the forest. And lo and behold, there's the car. The flying car. Apparently has been roaming all around this forest the entire semester after dropping them off and hitting the Whomping Willow at the beginning. Which, was a lot of... It's interesting to see that this car has just been roaming through this forest all this time. But they pass the car and they keep going, and then all of a sudden they're surrounded, grabbed by these giant spiders, and brought to this sort of big hollow where it's Aragog's lair, and there's all these giant spiders all over the place. And they meet Aragog, who Harry realizes is blind because he's older. And we learn that Aragog is the creature Hagrid had, and Aragog was not the monster back then. He wasn't from the Chamber of Secrets. But Aragog knows who is, but won't say what the creature is. He's never even told Hagrid, because it's their greatest enemy and they fear it so much they can't even speak it. Kind of like the human wizards do with Voldemort's name. But so we learn that Aragog is not the monster. Hagrid didn't open up the chamber. Hagrid's been framed. And Aragog bids them goodbye and to be eaten by his children. And then the car, of course, shows up last minute and saves them. Now, the movie turned this into a big, spectacular action scene, like one of the centerpieces of the film. And it goes by pretty quick here. It's they hop in the car, and that car just shoots out of there and gets them out of the forest real quick. There's not like a manic chase like in the movie. But that's understandable. The book doesn't need a blow-by-blow chase of the spiders. But it works great for a movie. So they're back in their beds, and as the chapter ends, Harry suddenly has light bulbs go on for himself too. And he realizes that 50 years ago, it was a girl who had been killed and had been found in a bathroom. And then he kind of finally makes the connection that is that Moaning Myrtle. And now he's going to decide they've got to go talk to her. And that's how the chapter ends. And then we have chapter 16, The Chamber of Secrets, the eponymously named chapter. And here now the main finale starts to begin. So now they learn that exams are still happening and they're only a week away. All the kids are like, all the students are like, well, why? There shouldn't be any exams with this stuff going on. But they're going to happen anyway. The mandrakes have matured, so they can start taking them and making them into the antidote for those who have been petrified. And then Ginny comes over in the Great Hall and sits down with Harry and Ron, and she's about to open up to them and tell them what's been going on. And I like this little moment here because she's so nervous. Harry's like, who does she remind me of? And then Harry realizes she's acting like Dobby, which is a great little just moment by Rowling here to just drop Dobby's name back into the story. And remind us, oh yes, Dobby the house elf is there. He's, we've seen him a couple of times in this book because we're going to get Dobby here at the end in the last chapter. So it's a nicely done little snippet to just like bring him back into our mind before, because we're only like a chapter or two before we see him again. But before she can open up, Percy shows up, interrupts her, and she scampers off. And Percy thinks she was just going to tell them about her seeing Percy be doing something he shouldn't have been doing. And Percy's not paying attention to what's been going on at all. Percy's caught in his own world and his own things. So then they're like, okay, we've got to go sneak off to Moaning Myrtle. But they get caught by McGonagall, and instead of being suspended or expelled or anything, Harry's like quickly lies and says, hey, we were trying to see Hermione. We haven't been able to see her for so long. And McGonagall kind of tears up and lets them go and says, all right, you've got my permission. Don't worry about class. Go see your friend. And while they're there, Harry notices in Hermione's hand, there's paper shoved in there and no one's noticed it. So Harry manages to slowly worry it out and get it. And then they read it. And they realized what Hermione had run off to the library about in the previous chapter, or 2 chapters ago. And she was researching the basilisk, and she figured out what the monster was. And then Harry realizes, oh, it's a snake. That's why I'm the only one who can hear it. And that Hermione figured out that it was moving through the pipes. And then Harry begins to then put a lot of pieces together, and he realizes, okay, why no one's been petrified? If the basilisk seeing you kills you, why petrification instead? And then he realizes Colin looked through the camera lens, and Justin looked through Nearly's headless Nick, and Hermione and the Ravenclaw girl had a mirror, and the cat, Mrs. Norris, I think, saw its reflection in the water from the bathroom on the floor. And so, since they didn't see the eyes directly and instead saw them with something in between, it saved their life and only petrified them instead. And so Harry's like, okay, now it's time to go to McGonagall and tell her what we know, tell her what we found out, so they know what the monster is. And they go down to the teacher's lounge, and they are waiting there because it's empty. And then they hear announcements all throughout the school that everyone must immediately go back to their house common rooms. Classes are canceled. Everything's canceled. Back they all have to go. And Ron and Harry hide in a cupboard in the office. And then most of the teachers come in except for Gilderoy. And McGonagall shows up and lets them know that the chamber has been opened again and Ginny's been taken into the chamber. And then Gilderoy shows up, and all the other teachers are like, all right, you keep claiming you got all these mad skills, so you know where the chamber is, you know how to get in there. And if only they had just let you go and do your thing, you would have gotten rid of this a long time ago. So go ahead. The monster's yours. Go to the chamber, confront it, and end this once and for all. Because this is our last day of Hogwarts existing as a school. And the school will be closing tomorrow. Unless this is finished. And so then the rest of the day is all the students knowing this is their last time ever at Hogwarts. And the school is going to be shutting its doors in the morning. And Ron here steps up and tells Harry, look, we're going to Lockhart. Since he's going to go fight this thing, we've got to go let him know it's a basilisk so he can be better prepared. And off they go to discover Lockhart is packing up to get the hell out of town. And that he's a fraud, that all the deeds he wrote about in his books were heroic deeds from other people, and that he had tracked them down, got all their intimate details, and then used a memory charm to wipe their minds, and took all the credit for himself. And before he can memory charm them, Harry disarms them. And they decide that Lockhart's got to come with them, because he is still, after all, the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. So he has to have some skill. So they bring Lockhart with them to Moaning Myrtle, and we finally learn how Moaning Myrtle died, and that she was killed by the basilisk. She had seen the sink open up, and as the basilisk was coming out, you figure out that that's what it was. So Harry realizes which sink it is and uses his parcel tongue to open it. And down into the tunnels they go, Lockhart, Ron, and Harry. And they come across what they think is the basilisk, its body blocking part of the corridor. But then they realize it's just a snake's skin that it had shed. So you get kind of an idea of how humongous this thing is. And then Lockhart kind of tricks Ron, snatches Ron's wand, and then goes to use the memory charm to wipe their memories. And of course, Ron's wand is broken, wrapped up with a spellotape, and it backfires on Lockhart, wipes his own memory, and causes part of the ceiling to come crashing down, trapping Lockhart and Ron on the other side, so only Harry can go forward, deeper into the chamber. And then Harry decides, all right, I'm going on, and finds finally at the end of this tunnel the door itself to the inner part of the Chamber of Secrets itself. And he opens the door, and in he goes. And that's how the chapter ends. Now, this was a fun chapter, because we get hit with a lot here. You know, Harry starts to put all these pieces together. We learn how Moaning Myrtle finally died. We learn Gilderoy Lockhart, this who just utterly ridiculous character, is a complete and total fraud. And since they're kids, though, they're bringing him along thinking that he's an adult. It's his adult job to handle this. And no matter how much of a fraud he might be about all those other things, he is the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, so he has to have skill. So we're going to bring him and make him fight. And of course, we get the whole reason why Ron's wand was broken in the beginning in the first place. But it's one of those funny things, though. It's like if Dobby hadn't tried to stop Harry from going and shut the door to platform 9 3/4, forcing them to take the car, which then broke Ron's wand, Lockhart would have wiped their memory, and they would have lost, and that would have been the end of the story. But all these just chain of events, going all the way back to the beginning of the book, are all like the perfect pieces needed. And whether that's just Rowling being really convenient plot-wise, or there's that little bit of fate and destiny involved here. Because Harry and Voldemort are moving very slowly, inexorably, towards that final confrontation later on. And enough pieces are put in place for them to keep bumping up against each other, but not ever finishing the job until the time is ready for them to be ready for each other. Just things to think about here, you know. And so now we're on to chapter 17, the Heir of Slytherin. So Harry goes into this big chamber. There's a giant statue of a wizard, which you assume is Salazar Slytherin himself. And then lying face down at its feet is Ginny. And she's not petrified, but she won't wake up. She's been ensorcelled. She's basically been drained of so much of her own existence, her own soul, her own energy. And then she's listless and asleep at this point. And then there's Tom Riddle standing there in the chamber, sort of glistening a bit, glowing. You can tell he's not fully there. He's a projection from the diary itself, and then there's the diary lying on the floor as well. And then we learn about how Ginny was writing in all of her fears in her diary. And Tom started using her and playing on her and sucking her energy and trying to get her to the point where eventually he can like transfer himself into her almost. And she was the one who he basically took over and made her kill the roosters, open up the chamber, unleash the basilisk to attack people, wrote the words on the wall about the chamber has been opened. And it's pretty, and you realize like Jenny's gone through hell here. That here's this 11-year-old girl just alone and afraid and worried about everything. Again, you get back to that same theme of the expectations of family, the expectations of the family name and what they put on you. Because even though they're not rich, the Weasleys are an old, pure-blood house. And there is that generational expectation that you have to succeed. And Harry is one of the unique people who has no history there in that sense. Because, yes, he's Potter and James and Lily, but he didn't grow up in that world with that expectation being drilled into him the way it's drilled into Ginny and drilled into Draco and perhaps and Ron as well, because we got to see Ron feeling this way in the first book of having the burden of that expectations on him. And here, though, Ginny being a girl and not really being able to open up and talk to her brothers ends up being her in the diary and pouring everything into the diary. And then Tom, being who he is, just completely using her and getting her to do all these dangerous things and horrible, horrible things. And then we learn from Tom who he really is. But Tom Marvolo Riddle is an anagram for I am Lord Voldemort. And we learn that Voldemort's real name was Tom Riddle, and he was a student at Hogwarts, and how he knew he would grow up to be, Lord Voldemort, the greatest wizard ever. And then Harry is like, no, Dumbledore is the greatest wizard ever. And that Voldemort, feared Dumbledore, and this is why he never went after Dumbledore. And Riddle is mad now, and Riddle's like, well, Dumbledore's gone. He's not here anymore. You're alone. And Harry's like, just to buy time, he's like, he's not as gone as you think he is. And Harry's loyalty to Dumbledore, harking back to the words Dumbledore told him in Hagrid's place. Harry basically arrives at that moment and says the right thing. And just kind of planted in his brain by Dumbledore, and it just kind of comes out of Harry here just to buy time. But would he have said that had Dumbledore not said those words to that empty, room? And here comes Fox, and the musical, this cry of the Phoenix is like music, and Fox swoops around, drops the sorting hat at Harry's feet, and lands on Harry's shoulder. And of course, Tom is like, starts laughing hysterically because he's brought you a hat. This is the great weapon that Dumbledore has left for you, is the freaking sorting hat. And so Tom wants to know, it's like, okay, how did you survive that night? How did Lord Voldemort, how did my future self fail to kill you? And apparently my future self has now failed to kill you twice. It's like, how do you keep surviving? And Harry tells him, it's like, my mother sacrificed herself for me, and that's what rebounded your curse. And then Tom is like, so then you're not special at all. I thought you were because there's a lot of similarities between us. We have common traits together. So I thought there was something unique and special about you like me. And he goes, but you're not special at all. And then he wants to kill him. And he unleashes the basilisk. Because, again, Tom, at this point, he's got Harry's wand in his hand. Because Harry put it down to try to get Ginny awake. And Tom's got his wand. But he can't really do anything because he's not completely really there at this point. Even though that sort of shimmering kind of look to him, he's slowly getting more and more solid. To eventually, once Ginny dies, Tom will be there. He'll have basically sucked her life force and made himself real again. Which would be, just on a total side tangent, what would have happened had he succeeded? Because you still have current day Voldemort hiding out somewhere, just trying to regain his strength. And then you'd have two Voldemorts. And what would happen? Would young Voldemort hunt down and kill old Voldemort for having failed all those years in his own future? You know, it would be a really interesting side tangent to go down that road. Like, where would that lead if that had actually happened here? Because there's no way Voldemort's going to tolerate Voldemort if there's two of them. There can be only one, is what I would expect to happen. And it would be an interesting fight, because this is young Voldemort, still in school, 16-year-old Voldemort, and a still very weak, but far more powerful, older Voldemort. So who would win between those two? That'd be an interesting. Or would young Voldemort go to try to kill old Voldemort, and old Voldemort would just seize him and take all of his energy and restore older Voldemort's self completely, which is probably what would happen, because I would think the older Voldemort is probably a lot smarter even than the young Voldemort, because he's had so much more experience, even though he's still in a very weakened state. But that would be quite an interesting sort of parallel universe story. And I think the Cursed Child goes down that road, but with different events from what I've heard, stuff with Goblet of Fire. But that should have been the story. That would have been an interesting thing to see. But anyway, total, complete, and utter tangent. And now get back to the events in this book. Harry's puts the hat on his head, and he's like, help me, help me, help me, help me. Gets clonked on the head by something, almost knocked out. And he pulls the hat off to discover a sword, a silver sword with ruby-studded handle. And Fox attacks the basilisk and gouges its eyes out, because there's no way Harry can fight this thing blind. And so Fox gives him a fighting chance. And then the big confrontation, the basilisk corners Harry, leaps at him, and then Harry shoves the sword through his mouth and kills him, but gets bitten by a fang that breaks off. And of course, Harry's now dying of poison. And Tom strolls over and he sits down to watch Harry die, because he wants to relish this moment. That he's finally succeeded. And Fox comes, drops down next to him, and then starts crying tears into his wound and heals Harry. And then Riddle doesn't realize this yet, but then Riddle finally realizes, the Fox has healed him. But now he's ready to kill Harry himself, because while he's not there 100%, he's got enough strength from the dying Ginny to where he could actually fight Harry, and he's got Harry's wand. But Fox swoops up, grabs the diary, drops it onto Harry's feet, and then Harry just on instinct takes the fang and stabs the diary and destroys this sort of incarnation of Riddle, and destroying all the magic in the book. And now it's just a book at this point, and all trace of Riddle's gone. All the dark magic in that book is destroyed by the poison in the basilisk fang. And Ginny finally wakes up, and Ron and Ginny and Fox go back through the tunnels, get back to where Ron was, finally opening enough rocks to get through. They all climb through. There's, like, now completely dumb Lockhart And Fox being a phoenix, and Dumbledore had mentioned this earlier on when we first saw Dumbledore's office and met Fox when Fox was going through his rebirth. And that Fox, phoenixes are extremely strong. And Fox is able to carry all of them up and out of the pipes and back up into the bathroom, where they meet Moaning Myrtle, who is really disappointed that poor Harry didn't get killed, because she was so looking forward to Ghost Harry and her hanging out for all eternity there in the bathroom, which I just got such a kick out of that moment that, that here's Harry succeeded again and Moaning Myrtle's all upset and disappointed. And now the main plot's over, and we have our last chapter. And this is chapter 18, Dobby's Reward. So they go from the chamber and right to, I think, McGonagall's office again. And they find Mrs. Weasley there and Mr. Weasley and Dumbledore. Dumbledore's returned. And then Harry finally opens up and pretty much tells them everything that's been going on, except for the diary. He leaves that little part out. But Dumbledore realizes that Ginny had been ensorcelled by Tom and all these things, and that it's not her fault. There's going to be no repercussions, nothing to worry about. And then all the rest of them go off to, and he leaves Harry. So Harry and Dumbledore are left alone. And here we get another, like in the first book, they sit down and have a conversation together, like kind of a recap. And we learn, according to Dumbledore's suspicion, that the reason there's similarities between Harry and Voldemort is not that Harry's actually like Voldemort or like Tom Riddle, and there's this fear of him becoming bad. It's that Voldemort had inadvertently transferred some of his own abilities to Harry when Voldemort killed Harry's parents and the killing curse rebounded and backfired. He had inadvertently transferred some little piece of himself, which is why Harry can speak Parseltongue and why he has some Slytherin traits to him. And considering the events in the final book, it makes you wonder, does Dumbledore already know here what Harry's scar really is? Like, has he known pretty much from the beginning? Really who and what Harry is and what Harry carries around. So, interesting little thing, because it goes back to something I've mentioned before about Dumbledore's playing a long game and will use anyone and everyone around him to do what's necessary to win. And, of course, winning not for himself, but for the whole wizarding world, to stop evil and darkness kind of stuff. But even here, we're already seeing that Dumbledore kind of suspects. If he doesn't know yet, he suspects. And, of course, because it's just part of the story, he keeps that from Harry. And we get here in this moment, in their little talk, a nice little thing that Dumbledore mentions, and it's important, at least for me, where he goes, "It's our choices, Harry, that show us what we truly are, far more than our abilities." And this is one of the things that I like about the Rowling's writing and about this series in general, is you get little gems like that scattered throughout the books. Because in life, really, it's what we choose to do in those moments really define us far more than any particular ability we have. Harry realizes that the Sorting Hat was right, that he belonged in Gryffindor, because the Sorting Hat brought him Godric Gryffindor's sword to help him defeat the Basilisk. And I think those doubts of Harry's about should he have been a Slytherin are kind of gone here. And one other thing Harry goes over here that he had told in just the private conversation, I think, with Dumbledore, is about the diary and Riddle's diary. It's specifically about the diary. And Malfoy bursts into the room, Lucius Malfoy, followed by Dobby. And Lucius wants to know what the hell Dumbledore's doing there. He's suspended. He's not supposed to be there. And Dumbledore lets Lucius know that Voldemort's plans have been foiled again. The diary has been discovered, clearing Ginny's name, and how lucky they were that the diary was found and what its purpose was before. Otherwise, Ginny would have been blamed for everything. The Weasley family's reputation would have been destroyed. Your Muggle act would have gone away. And, he's kind of letting Lucius know, I know you were involved in this. And while this conversation's happening, Dobby is like pointing at the book, the diary, and pointing at Lucius Malfoy, and like Harry, pay attention. And then Harry realizes Lucius, how Ginny got the diary in the first place, in that confrontation in Diagon Alley. And Harry pretty much confronts him about it and calls him out for it. And then Lucius, in a huff, off he goes. Dobby's following him. And then Harry has an idea and asks Dumbledore, can I give the diary back to Lucius? And he says yes. He takes his sock off, stuffs the diary in the sock, runs after Lucius and Dobby in the hallway, and says, here, Lucius, to Malfoy, and gives him the sock-colored diary. And Malfoy takes it, Lucius takes it, and takes the sock off and tosses it. And then kind of threatens Harry. And then all of a sudden he's like, all right, Dobby, let's go. And then we realize Dobby is standing there holding the sock. And Dobby's like, Master has given Dobby a sock. And Dobby's free. Because apparently Lucius tossed it and Dobby caught it out of thin air. And that counts as him being given clothing. And then Lucius goes to strike Harry, and we see how powerful these elves actually are. And Dobby just sends Lucius, throws him down the stairs with his magic. And you realize, these house elves are really, really powerful. So it's an interesting kind of setup, how they can be so owned and slaves when they're so powerful. That's pretty much the last main scene of the book. And the rest of it, like the last page or so, is just the wrap-up. Gryffindor's won the House Cup again because of the 400 points Ron and Harry got helping stop the Chamber and the Basilisk. So it's second year in a row Gryffindor's won the House Cup. Though I think second year in a row, any attempts to win the Quidditch Cup have been thwarted. Now, he's yet to do that. And then it's just the wrap-up. The semester's over. They're all going back home. And, of course, the joke at the end of how, if Harry told the Dursleys everything he managed to accomplish in fighting off this basilisk and saving the school, they would just be mad that he didn't get himself killed. And that's how the book ends. So now my final thoughts on the Chamber of Secrets book. I really, really enjoyed this. I enjoyed it the first time around, but I especially enjoyed it a lot more the second time around even. I would have put this probably at number, if I was to rank all 7 books, I probably would have put this down at number 5. Somewhere around there, 5 or 6. But I'm going to have to definitely rethink that. This is going to end up higher on my list because I really, really enjoyed this one. Lots of great things in this here. Rowling's writing better, more layered, more intricate. But just a really smartly well done story. Lots of things in here. We get, again, I just spent, I don't know how many hours talking about this book in this last 4 episodes. So I am going to wrap this up. I pretty much gave this 4.5 stars if I was to give it a specific rating. Next week, on Christmas Eve, I start my first time reread of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. And I am super excited for that one. That was my favorite of the 7 books. In the first and only time I've ever read them. So I've been really, really eager to get back to that book to see how it reads now as a reread, with me knowing the whole story now. The reread of this made this such an even better book than the first time around. So I'm really, really curious to see how The Prisoner of Azkaban is going to play out for me. I'm especially excited. So I'm going to be reading that on Christmas Eve, chapters 1 through 4. and then posting that on Christmas Day, that Monday. And this video here, it's December 17th as I'm recording this and reading this. And this video will be up on Monday, the 18th, which will also be my Vlogmas 2017 Day 18 video as well. And I am pretty much going to wrap this up here. I'm not going to ramble too much. I really, really enjoyed this book again, 4.5 stars. And I will see you in the comments. I will see you on Twitter. I want to know what your opinion is of this book in the whole series and where it kind of ranks for you. And if you've done a reread of this recently, what your thoughts were of it compared to like maybe your original time you've read it. I always like to hear how other people like find a story when they come back to it, knowing the whole story as a whole. So this one, like I said, I really, really enjoyed. And I am going to wrap things up here. I will see you next week for episode 9 and the start of The Prisoner of Azkaban. I am Charles of SirBookSage. Happy reading.